The gentlewoman from Virginia, Mrs. McClellan, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material on the subject of this special order.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is with great honor that I rise today to co-anchor this Congressional Black Caucus Special Order Hour along with my distinguished colleague from Louisiana, Representative Troy Carter. For the next 60 minutes, members of CBC have the opportunity to speak directly to the American people on Gun Violence Awareness Month, an issue of great importance to the Congressional Black Caucus, Congress, and the constituents we represent. Mr. Speaker, on March 7th, 2023, I stood in the well and took my oath of office into this body. My children stood with me. My then 13-year-old son, who was very excited and impressed some people with his dance moves. Less than a week later, my son Jackson showed up at school to find out one of his classmates was dead. He had killed himself accidentally using a loaded gun as a prop to film a music video. My son was devastated. He was devastated again when 2 months later, the school year abruptly came to an end when Sean Jackson was shot and killed minutes after receiving his high school diploma. These are 2 of the 46,728 people who died from gun-related injuries in 2023 alone. They were among the average 13,300 Black Americans who die of gun violence every single year. Sierra Jenkins, Jaheim Dickerson, Devin Harris, Samaya Yardley, Tyshawn White, Jane Carter, Kenneth Cooper, Micaiah Dickinson, Lorenzo Smith, just some of the names of people whose lives were ended by gun violence, some on purpose, some by their own hand, some accidentally. And too many of our communities are disproportionately impacted by this violence. We cannot allow this violence to become normalized. We must stand together to advance common sense gun safety legislation, invest in community violence intervention programs, and address the root causes of gun violence. Year after year, we go back to our districts, we go to vigils, we watch the news, we see the tragedies, we come back here, we stand for a moment of silence, we give our thoughts and prayers, and nothing changes. But the overwhelming consensus of the American people is that we have to do something. Now, as a state legislator, I focused on addressing the root causes of gun violence. I thought there'd be bipartisan support for that. And to a certain extent, there was. I championed investment in the creation of a firearm violence and intervention and prevention fund with Delegate Marcia Price from Newport News when I was in the state Senate. This program and fund would provide a pathway to research demographics and trends and implement evidence-based solutions to address the root causes of gun violence, because gun violence in Richmond, Virginia is different from gun violence in New Orleans, Louisiana, is different from gun violence in New York City, is different from gun violence in Newark, New Jersey. And so we need to get at the root causes. But for too many of our young people, the root cause is access to guns is very easy. And they weren't taught to regulate emotions. And things that in my age were settled on the playground with a fist are now settled with a gun. And so you can be called a name on social media. You can call someone a name on social media, and the next thing you know, you're shot dead. We need to do something to address that gun violence. And I was proud to come to Congress and try to continue to work on that. But in April, the Trump administration terminated nearly 400 grants from the Department of Justice's Office of Justice Programs that support everything from victim services to substance use and mental health treatment to juvenile justice and child protection. These are grants that were used to address the root causes of gun violence in our communities. There have been deep cuts to the Community Violence Intervention and Prevention Initiative, the largest source of federal funding for community violence intervention. Funding that authorized by Congress in 2022 that has invested $300 million in community violence intervention programming and research. And now about half of those investments have been cut. All this does is invite tragedy back into our communities. We can't let it happen. And for Black people and the communities that we represent, we are only 14% of the U.S. population. We represent 60% of all firearm homicide victims. A Black person in America is 11.5 times more likely to die of gun violence. And while gun violence became the leading cause of death of children, all children, for the first time in 2020, it's been the leading cause of death for Black children since 2006. We must do more. We must do more. Because I can't tell you how difficult it is every time there's a mass shooting, every time someone is shot, going to the grocery store, playing in a park, going to the movie theater, turning in the wrong driveway, showing up at school, after graduation, on and on and on. Every time it happens, my son and my daughter look at me and they ask, am I next? Do you know how difficult that is? Do you know how hard it is when your children who know someone who has died from gun violence have to spend their days in school in active shooter drills rather than learning? Enough is enough. Enough is enough, Mr. Speaker. We must do more. Thoughts and prayers are not enough. It is now my pleasure to yield to the gentleman from New Orleans, Louisiana, Mr. Troy Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am grateful to be here to co-author this Congressional Black Caucus Special Order Hour for the month of June. I want to thank my esteemed colleague and dear friend, Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan, Democrat from Virginia's 4th District, for her outstanding leadership and for leading this incredible hour. I rise tonight during National Gun Violence Awareness Month, not just with sorrow, but with a sense of urgency. I rise tonight during the National Gun Awareness Month to shake the core of our very being. I want to be abundantly clear that this is not about taking away anyone's Second Amendment right, the right to bear arms. Don't be fooled by the gun manufacturers who want to continue to put profits over people, over children, over people's lives. I am from the South. I am a gun enthusiast. I do believe in the Second Amendment, but I'm a responsible gun owner. I am trained to use my firearm. I understand the importance of proper storage, protection, training. I understand the importance of having reasonable waiting periods, the importance of being familiar with your weapon and making sure it's never left where children or untrained people can gain access. So yes, the Second Amendment stands, but our common sense stands too. that we must protect communities and we must make sure that firearms never find their way into the hands of people who are ill-trained, who have ill intent, who seek to cause the damage that we've seen with our mass shootings. However, for far too long, our nation has tolerated an epidemic that is killing our children, our friends, and our future. Gun violence has ravaged this country, and while every American feels the impact, Black communities bear the brunt. Black communities die from gun violence at 2.7 times the rate of our white counterparts. Let me say that again. 2.7 times the rate. Over 13,300 Black lives are lost every year to gun violence. That's not a statistic. That's our sons, our daughters, our neighbors, our church members. That's an entire generation lost. In 2023 alone, firearm homicides in Black communities rose by over 23%, suicides by 50%, unintentional shootings by 11%. These are not isolated tragedies. This is a pattern, a crisis of an epidemic. And yet, this Congress remains stuck in neutral. It has been 3 years since the bipartisan Safer Communities Act was signed into law by President Biden. Did I say bipartisan? Yes, it was bipartisan. I voted for it. I stood proudly with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to take this important step. But let's be honest, it was just that one step. A step that needs to be followed up with more steps, more action, more help, more signals that we're bigger and we're better than the gun lobby. And since then, since that one step, mass shootings have surged. Right now, families are afraid to go to the mall, the movie theater, schools, grocery stores, concerts, places of worship. No one feels safe because oftentimes nowhere is safe. The Gun Violence Archives has already reported that 133 mass shootings have happened this year. 133, and it's only the first week of June. Every shooting leaves behind a shattered family, a traumatized community, a ripple effect that lasts generations. And let's be clear, Black Americans are not just victims of community violence. We're also disproportionately impacted by rogue police violence, police shootings, shootings of unarmed men and women, often young people. The truth can't be ignored. When we talk about gun violence in our country, accountability must be a part of our reform. We know that thoughts and prayers after these tragedies are important and are powerful tools, but alone can't do it. We must put our well wishes and our prayers into action. I recognize that at this moment, we demand action because words alone won't stop a bullet. I know that being silent won't stop a bullet. I know that being complicit won't stop a bullet. I know pointing fingers won't stop a bullet. I know running from the scoring of the NRA won't stop a bullet, but I know what can stop a bullet. Men and women in this body standing up together saying enough is enough, because these lives are not just Black, they're not just white, they're not just Democrat, they're not just independent, they're not just Republican, they're Americans. And there are children, and there are seniors, and there are neighbors, and there are friends, and there are colleagues. Wake up, my friends. This is not about us against them. This is about us together fighting an epidemic that's literally killing our community. So today, I say to my colleagues across the aisle, do not look away. Come to the table, work with us. The cost of inaction is measured in lives lost, in our neighborhoods, in our classrooms, in our communities across the country. To my Republican colleagues, do not look away. Do not wait until the next shooting is in your neighborhood. Do not wait until it's your constituent, your relative, your friend, your fraternity brother, your sorority sister, your neighbor, your colleague, your loved one. Mass shooters don't care about your party. They don't care about your socioeconomic status. Unfortunately, they often think about hate based by race, based by who you are and who you choose to love, by who you choose to worship. But this is America, and these are all things that are part of our strength. Let's not allow them to push us in the corner and fight against each other. We should not live like this. Gun violence is not a political issue. It's a human issue. The time for reform is not tomorrow. The time for reform is not next year. The time for reform is now. And the people who must do it is us. Let's rise to this moment. Let's demonstrate to the American people, while Republicans and Democrats may disagree philosophically on many things, let us agree that gun violence is no way for Americans to have to live. Mr. Speaker, I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Claudia Cate, a 16-year-old who dreamed of becoming a nurse, killed by gun violence. Cecilia Thomas, a 5-month-old, shot and killed in Chicago, a 5-month-old. I now yield to the Honorable Robin Kelly from Illinois.
Thank you, Rep. McClellan, and thank you, Rep. Carter, for inviting me to speak tonight. Mr. Speaker, I rise today because there is a gun violence epidemic in America. I have spoken loudly and clearly on gun safety again and again and again, shooting after shooting. Moments of silence have never been enough. Thoughts and prayers have never been enough. Americans need real action by Congress to end gun violence. That means universal background checks, funding and support for community violence intervention organizations, safe storage laws to prevent unintentional shootings, an assault weapons ban. We know the solutions to end gun violence, and yet the Trump administration and this legislative body refuses to act. Instead, President Trump and Republicans reverse the progress we've made these past few years. On day one, in the Oval Office, President Trump shut the doors of the White House Office on Gun Violence Prevention. Since then, he continues to pour salt into injury after injury. The Department of Justice terminated over $66 million in grants that were already designated by Congress to community violence intervention programs. CVI organizations are led by trusted community members who offer job training, mental health resources, de-escalation tactics, and more to keep our neighborhoods safe. CVI strategies are proven, evidence-based solutions to gun violence, and yet the Trump administration decided they're inefficient. House Republicans are complicit in the Trump agenda to endanger public safety. In the dead of night, Republicans added a provision to their budget that would deregulate gun silencers, allowing any and all private sales of silencers. The deregulation of gun silencers is reckless and outrageous. Silencers are not something out of a movie. They cause real pain in our communities. In 2019, a gunman attached the silencer to a handgun that he used to kill 12 people in Virginia Beach. Survivors of the shooting said they did not flee because they didn't identify the muffled sounds as gunshots. If the cost of American lives does not move my colleagues across the aisle, then perhaps they will be attentive to the fact that the deregulation of silencers will cost American taxpayers nearly $3 billion. Americans cannot afford the cost of gun violence, not in dollars or in pain or grief. Black Americans in particular bear a disproportionate weight of that grief. This past weekend, I joined survivors of gun violence in an environmentally friendly balloon release to honor the 46,000 lives lost to gun violence every year. They've lost daughters and sons, nephews and nieces, siblings, mothers and fathers to gun violence. One daughter's name is Hydea Pendleton. Hydea was a bright student, involved in marching band and volleyball. She was on top of the world when she led her marching band in President Obama's second inauguration. Just 1 week later, she was shot and killed in a park in Chicago. Hydea should have turned 28 years old yesterday. Hydea's friends and family started the Wear Orange movement to raise awareness of gun violence. Now the orange color has become a beacon for activity and advocacy against gun violence. Since they started the Wear Orange movement in 2015, I've introduced the Wear Orange resolution every year to honor Hydea. I ran for office because I couldn't stand by and watch as Congress did nothing as children like Hydea were ripped away from families, while gun violence became the leading cause of death for all children and teenagers. In 2020, it's been the leading cause of death for Black children since 2016. I swore my first oath of office just 3 months after Hydea was shot in the 2nd District. Since then, I have never, ever stopped fighting for her, and I will never stop until we end gun violence once and for all. I yield back.
Tiana Major, a 9-year-old gymnast, until gun violence cut her life short. Kingston Campbell, a 6-year-old killed when shooters were fired into his home. They can't speak for themselves. We speak for them. It is now my pleasure to yield to the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, the gentlewoman from New York, Yvette Clarke.
I'd like to take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to thank Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan and Congressman Troy Carter for anchoring the Congressional Black Caucus Special Order Hour. I rise tonight with my colleagues of the CBC to recognize Gun Violence Awareness Month and to bring attention to the impact of gun violence on Black communities around our nation. For decades, gun violence has been an epidemic that has had a disproportionate and devastating impacts on Black communities. In fact, the facts are sobering and clear. On average, more than 13,000 Black people die from gun violence each year. In the United States, Black Americans die from gun violence at nearly 3 times the rate of white Americans. In 2023, firearm homicides against Black Americans rose over 23%. In that same year, firearm suicides in Black communities increased 50%, and unintentional shooting deaths rose 11%. And in the 5 years since the police murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, police shootings of Black Americans have continued to rise. These are not simply statistics. These are the heartbreaking stories of tragedy and loss that should shake our collective conscience as Americans of goodwill. From the racist murder of 9 parishioners at the Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, to the racist mass shooting at the Tops grocery store in Buffalo, New York, that claimed the lives of 10 people, to countless police shootings of unarmed Black men, women, and children. Our nation has unfortunately bore witness to far too many horrific acts of gun violence against Black communities. This crisis of gun violence requires action, not thoughts and prayers, as the American people have become far too accustomed to hearing from many of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Instead of working to pass legislation to keep our communities safe from gun violence, the Republicans included in their reconciliation package a provision that calls for the elimination of registration and ownership requirements for silencers that have been in place since the National Firearms Act went into effect in 1934. By contrast, When House Democrats were in the majority in the 117th Congress, the Congressional Black Caucus was instrumental in passing the most significant piece of gun reform legislation in nearly 30 years with the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which was signed into law by President Joe Biden. With that historic legislation, we took meaningful steps to protect our children, keep our schools safe, and reduce the overall threat of gun violence around our country by extending background checks for firearm purchases, clarifying licensing requirements, funding red flag laws and crisis intervention programs, and weakening the boyfriend loophole. And while we've made strides towards common sense gun reform, more needs to be done to keep our communities safe. So during this National Gun Violence Awareness Month and throughout the year, the Congressional Black Caucus recognizes the critical need for reforming our gun safety laws to protect all of our communities. Our caucus remains committed to meeting this crisis with the urgency of now to end the senseless acts of violence that take thousands of innocent lives every year. That time for reform is now. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back to the gentlelady from Virginia.
Thank you. To Evan McFall, he dreamed of being an NFL player until gun violence took his life at 11. Zamir Lopez, he had dance moves and rap skills until gun violence took his life at 8. Mr. Speaker, I now yield to Representative Bonnie Watson Coleman of New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleagues for co-anchoring this very important special order hour. Every 7 hours, a child is killed by gunfire in the United States. In 2025, thus far, nearly 100 American children did not make it to their 12th birthday because they were killed by gunfire. Every single child lost is an unfathomable tragedy. Families are destroyed and communities are left in anguish, but this cycle of death and grief is far more prolific in the Black community. Black Americans die by gun violence at a rate 2.7 times greater than their white peers, including a 50% increase in firearms suicides in 2023. Communities across our country face this daily reality, but too many powerful people here in Washington, D.C. feel too comfortably removed from it. They'll call for a moment of silence and then move on, and nothing will happen. So rather than committing to fight this uniquely American terror, they will find any excuse to do nothing. It's video games, it's mental health, it's anything but guns. Congress has the power to act to keep our young people safe from their leading cause of death, gun violence. We also have a moral obligation to act, to free our society from the fear that comes with dropping our children and grandchildren off at school, or the mall, or the movies, or even a house party. Enough moments of silence. These moments of silence don't save a single solitary life. Now is the time that we must act to save our generations. With that, I yield back.
Sir Antonio Brown, a 6-year-old killed near his Kansas City home by guns. King, a Georgian 9-year-old killed by another child handling an unsecure gun. Mr. Speaker, I now yield to the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Representative Valerie Fouché.
Thank you to Congresswoman McClellan and Congressman Carter for anchoring this special order hour to bring attention to one of the most pressing and pervasive challenges confronting our nation. Mr. Speaker, I rise today with urgency, grief, and determination during National Gun Violence Awareness Month, a time for us to recognize the heartbreaking toll that gun violence continues to take on communities across the country. I am deeply saddened that this past Sunday in my home state of North Carolina, there was a mass shooting where at least 80 shots were fired, killing one person and injuring 11 others. Unfortunately, this is not an isolated incident. Gun violence is a public health epidemic that affects Americans and ravages communities in every zip code in every state. But year after year, we see the same devastating trend. Black Americans are dying from gun violence at nearly 3 times the rate of white Americans. Each year, more than 13,000 Black lives are lost to this epidemic. They are mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, friends, and neighbors whose futures are stolen, whose communities are left grieving, and whose absence is deeply felt every single day. And tragically, the violence does not end there. For years, Black Americans have faced a persistent and disproportionate risk of being killed in police encounters involving firearms. Let me be clear, no one in America should have to fear for their lives in our schools, our stores, our places of worship, our streets, or anywhere in our communities. But while this crisis and disparity continues to grow across the country, some in Congress are moving in the wrong direction. Again, my colleagues just shared, just a couple of weeks ago, House Republicans voted along party lines to pass the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which included a provision to deregulate silencers. Because of the dangers they pose, these devices have been highly regulated for nearly 100 years, and this provision would make it easier for individuals to use firearms with less risk of detection, further endangering our communities already suffering from gun violence. This is not the type of comprehensive gun reform legislation that the American people need or deserve. A majority of Americans support universal background checks, closing loopholes in gun sales, red flag laws, and safe storage legislation. So I asked my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, what are we waiting for? The oath of office that all members of Congress took demands that we protect the American people, but every day that we delay, lives are lost. I urge my Republican colleagues to join House Democrats, the Congressional Black Caucus, and the House Gun Violence Prevention Task Force in advancing meaningful, common sense reforms that will save lives, reduce violence, and protect all Americans. Thank you, and with that, I yield back.
Jacoby Fanning, a 16-year-old killed in a South Carolina shooting. Isaiah, a 16-year-old in Maryland, shot near his high school. Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentleman from Maryland, Representative Glenn Ivey. Actually, I yield to the gentlewoman from New Jersey, LaMonica McGiver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak on an issue that has devastated families and communities across this country, gun violence. For years, gun violence has been an unchecked epidemic. In the Black community, the toll has been heartbreaking and more deadly, and still very little meaningful action has been taken to stop the hurt. Our communities continue to be ravaged while many remain silent. We cannot continue to treat this as normal. There's nothing normal about burying children, nothing normal about the weapons that turn schools, churches, and neighborhoods into battlegrounds. I'm here for the next generation to say they deserve better than this. They deserve a future where they never have to say enough is enough, because we will have already done what is necessary. I, along with my CBC colleagues, will not stay silent. We will continue to demand comprehensive gun reform, background checks, closing loopholes, and a ban on assault weapons, because our lives and our children's lives depend on it. The time for reform is now. Let's do what is right. Let's do what is just. Let's do what is necessary, because before another name is added to another list. With that, I yield back to the gentlewoman of Virginia.
Sarabi Medina. She lost her mother to gun violence. And then at 9, she was killed on her way home with ice cream for her father, cut down by gun violence by a neighbor. Mr. Speaker, how many more? How many more children on the way to school, at the bus stop, at the grocery store, in the park, in front of their house, in bed? How many more? How many more children have to die before we act? How many more women stuck in domestic violence situations who try to get out, who get protective orders against their partner, only to have that partner go get a gun and kill them? How many more? How many more people desperate take their own life because getting a gun is so easy, much easier than getting the mental health treatment that they need? How many more? How many more thoughts are we going to need? How many more prayers? Mr. Speaker, enough is enough. When I was a kid in the late 70s and 80s, early 80s, I think the biggest thing that my mom worried about when I went to school was whether I'd eat the lunch that they served. Do you know what it's like to put your child on a bus and wonder if they're going to come home? Do you know what it's like to go to a park to celebrate a birthday and your child doesn't come home? Too many people do. Too many Black people do. Too many people in our communities are disproportionately impacted by this public health crisis. And even when we find bipartisan agreement, I was able to find bipartisan agreement to get a fund created in the Virginia government, the Gun Violence and Prevention Grant Fund. And yet, the federal funding that was available to fund the programs that are proven to address the root causes of gun violence are being cut. It makes no sense. And every day, our children see this. They're traumatized by the mass shooter drills. They're traumatized by the friends that are there one day and gone the next. And every single time my son sees a story of someone dying at the hand of a gun, because of a gun, he asks me, am I next? And I say to him, Jackson, I am doing everything in my power to make sure you're not. But I can't do it alone. The Congressional Black Caucus can't do it alone. We need 218 people in the House and 60 in the Senate who are willing to do something more than thoughts and prayers. We need a president and an administration that says enough is enough. And if you don't want to do anything to actually take the guns off the street, then at least invest in the root causes of violence, because it's too easy for someone desperate enough to take their life to get a gun and do it. It is too easy for somebody who wants to start a race war to get a gun and walk into a church where people pray with him, and he shoots them dead. Enough is enough. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for your attention. I thank the members of the Congressional Black Caucus who joined me tonight. And with that, I yield back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Ozlowski, for 30 minutes.